Well, good evening and welcome to our work session of September 14th, 2020. We are looking at a number of things tonight concerning our park strategic master plan and presentations. This will be for discussion only. Please call us to order.
Mayor Hartke.
Here. Here.
Councilmember Stewart is on his way. Councilmember Clemens.
Here.
Councilmember Wong.
Here.
Councilmember Rowe.
Here.
Councilmember Orlando.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right. Thank you, City Clerk. At this point, let me turn this over to, boy, that was pretty good, Mr. Councilmember Stewart. City Manager, let me turn this over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. As a reminder, as Mayor said, Council did approve a contract for a consulting firm, Pros Consulting, here a few months ago for the update to the city's Parks Master Plan. As the Mayor mentioned, we have been working on this master plan during these last few months. Tonight, Andy Bass, along with our consultant team, is going to present to you the results of a lot of the public input, just keeping in mind that this is one data point and we still have recommendations and everything that'll be coming back to you later, but definitely wanted to get this in front of council prior to some more discussion that I believe will be released tomorrow. So with that, I'll give it over to Andy Bass, our Community Services Director.
Good evening, mayors and council. Thank you, City Manager. As was noted, our goal tonight is to present the results of the community survey that was performed in connection with our Park Strategic Master Plan. This info is really important. Not only is it a scientifically valid survey, but it's probably the most representative survey when you look at the residents of Chandler. And although that we did receive a large participation rate and a lot of information, our public engagement process was very robust, and this is only one of many opportunities that we have had. And those include, we do have a project website that has been up from the start of this project. It's a place where people can go and get updates on the project, and more importantly, they can also provide comments. And to date, I think we've received over 200 comments through this website, so it's been a very effective tool as well. We also held an internal focus group with city staff and city leadership. We've met with our Park and Recreation Advisory Board. And we had a special meeting with our athletic sport league providers, those who do our youth sports as well as adult sports, basically anyone who reserves the field here in Chandler was invited to this meeting, and we had a great discussion and heard what their current needs are and what they see as their future needs over the next few years. And then also we had a virtual community meeting, which was great. It was a great turnout, even though through this COVID, we found ways to try to reach people. We had over 60 people attend our first virtual meeting back in June, and we have our second follow-up virtual meeting tomorrow, which has over 60 people again registered to participate. So there's been a lot of community involvement and excitement over this project. So while tonight's results that will be presented to you are specific to the survey, it's just very important for you to keep in mind that the final recommendations that will be included in the Park Strategic Master Plan will include all of these public engagement, everything we've heard, and everything that we have learned, as well as our park assessments that is currently being performed on each one of our parks. So when this is all wrapped up, we will have our public input as well as kind of a survey of our existing situation in our park, and it will come forth as recommendations in that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Spetz, who is with Pros Consulting, who is one of our consultants working on this project.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Mayor, Council, City Manager. Appreciate the opportunity to kind of give you an update. I think that's in essence where we're at. The best way to say this is, community engagement, parks in particular are meant to be used by the public. And so it is exceptionally important to find out the needs of your community, both needs that are being met as well as unmet needs. This kind of culminates what we would call phase one of the project. Phase two is going to be a much more technical phase, and I'll brief you on that at the end. But really, tonight is just about providing you information about the community engagement process to date, the key findings, and then our next steps. So I think it's important to recognize that this is a system-wide plan, but we are also looking at it in 4 different areas. There are 4 park planning areas associated with Chandler. And so it's important for us to recognize that there are different demographics in each of these community areas. And it's important to recognize there's also potentially different needs. And so though we are looking at this as a system-wide plan, we're also going to be making very specific recommendations associated with each of these park planning areas. So our public input is exceptionally collaborative, but it's also had to be very creative during COVID because we really kicked this project off right at about the time that COVID started, at least the public engagement side of the equation. So at the center of any community engagement process is obviously your residents. We've done a very good job of creating curiosity about the plan. As Mr. Bass had mentioned, we've had over 200 individual comments come in via the project website. We also need to be very clear about what this plan is, but more importantly, what the plan is not. This is not about doing a site-specific park master plan in a certain part of the community. It's about trying to understand and create equity and balance for your system. And so we've been very clear about that in our communications with the public. We need to create confidence. And this is not just confidence that folks realize that their voice has been heard, but we also need to realize that we need to create confidence that not just that their voice has been heard, but it's going to be acted upon. This is part of building advocacy for the plan at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. And then, as I mentioned, we've had to be very creative. So some of our creative engagement processes have been really a combination of in-person prior to basically the middle of March, and then really relying on technology and in a very technology-driven community, whether it be through project website and or the virtual community meetings. So the project website is available throughout the entire project. I wanted to be very clear that though we are kind of culminating phase one, community engagement in this project does not stop. It is a continual, constant, consistent opportunity for the public to engage, for us to receive their feedback, and for us to consider it as we go forward. But we did have internal focus group meetings with city staff in February, the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, which we'll be meeting again with in October. That sports group stakeholder meeting, the statistically valid survey, and that virtual community meeting that was held in June. So this is just a snapshot of the project website. The web link, basically, if you Google it or you Bing it or whatever search engine you choose, if you were to just type in Plan Chandler, this is the first one that pops up. So as Mr. Bass had mentioned, we have received over 200 individual comments through that website. We did a virtual community meeting on June 23rd. How did we let people know? I think that's really important to let people know. But we had direct email invites from the department's customer database. At that time, we had 191 individuals participate, and they received an individual email from invite to participate in the virtual community meeting. And then, of course, there were city press releases, postings on the project website, the city website, and of course, social media. So we did actually end up with 116 participants in that meeting. And I thought it was actually important for us to recognize where those folks came from associated with the park planning areas. And it was fairly well balanced, a little less in the southwest part of your community, but also very well balanced west, north, and southeast. So the statistically valid survey is an exceptionally defensible mechanism, and I know you all are very familiar with this, but we issued this over the summer. Long story short, our goal was to achieve 500, and initially we were looking to achieve 500 from out the community as a whole. We did end up with 652. But as part of that 652, in keeping with creating balance and understanding that you have 4 park planning areas, we've also created some analysis associated with each of those 4 park planning areas. But the 652 surveys basically means that if you did this survey 100 times, you would get the same results 95 out of 100 with that plus or minus of about 3.8%. Important to recognize that the survey needed to be demographically and geographically balanced. This is a scatter plot map of all of the dots that represent where survey responses came from. And you can see that it is very well balanced in all of your residential areas throughout your city. So advocacy is the very first set of information we want to review.
Mayor.
In terms of asking folks if they, how
Councilmember
important high-quality park experiences are to quality
sir.
of life. I'm sorry.
Mike, we've got a question.
Oh, yeah, sir, sorry.
Oh, Mike, right? Michael Strauss? The name?
Svets.
Svets, I'm sorry, Mr. Svets. Before we get started on the survey, how did you incorporate the other several hundred, 300 something inputs that you got on this master plan?
I'm sorry, one more time.
How would you incorporate those comments into the master plan?
So how we will incorporate that is it's the methodology between taking qualitative and quantitative data. And so the idea behind the qualitative data, the narrative that we receive from folks, whether it be through focus groups or websites, is to kind of understand what the key themes are and or what and how they align then with the statistically valid survey. We have had very specific comments to having a drainage basin in the Orangewood neighborhood area converted to a park, to something very general about needing more splash pads or shade or trees. So the idea is to understand the relationship and the consistency that we're seeing between the statistically valid survey and the website comments. I can say with confidence that we have received a lot of synergy between both the comments that the community has made, as well as the statistically valid survey results.
So again, how do you incorporate that? I mean, are we going, how do
From a
we-
methodology
Yeah, I mean, you have
perspective,
statistical analysis. Do they answer the same question that the statistical analysis individuals, or they just gave you open-ended comments?
they are just providing open-ended comments that
Right.
help to frame kind of what some of the very key themes are associated with where the park and recreation, the park system needs to go to meet their needs.
Okay, so,
So the methodology is that we create a weighting system of 65% on the statistically valid survey and 35% based on the qualitative open-ended responses that we receive from the community.
so then how is that incorporated into the data you're about to show us now, or is it?
It will be incorporated as we go forward. As I said, we wanted to get feedback tomorrow night as well through the virtual community meeting that we're going to have. But it will basically be interfaced, and we're going to align what we would call kind of the key themes that come out of the statistically valid survey with the key themes that come out of the qualitative input that we've received from a city as a whole. But then also we will take that very specific information if it relates to West Chandler or Southeast Chandler, or a very specific location or a very specific request, and start to understand how that works with all of the other technical information that we still have to complete, which is completing the inventory and assessment work. So how does the community's engagement and their needs and their responses, both qualitative and quantitative, how does it impact an implementation plan for your existing system, number one? But then number two, given the fact that your community is going to grow, then how does that system need to grow specifically? And I certainly will touch on that at the end of the presentation, a little bit more about how all this works together.
So Mayor, one follow-up. So what I'm hearing you say is potentially some of these numbers may change.
The numbers for the statistically valid survey will not change because we're only issuing that once. However, the prioritization that I'm going to show you may change towards the middle part or end of the project.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Sure.
Please continue.
So advocacy, very quickly, how important are high quality parks and trails to the quality of life? We asked folks from very important all the way to not all that important. 61% very important, 34% important. So 95% of your community responded that it's either very important or important to their quality of life. In terms of level of satisfaction with the overall value that they receive from the system, 24% very satisfied, 57% satisfied. So that's 81% of your community are very satisfied or satisfied with the system as it is today. The national benchmark through all of the surveys that ETC Institute does across the country is 24%. So you're right on the mark with regards to the national benchmark for very satisfied. Park and facility visitation and condition is the next set of information. We asked folks whether or not they use your park system, and 88% of folks have visited your park system in the last year. Trails was 49%, and then multi-purpose fields and diamond fields are far less than that, 19 and 14%. But I don't think that's necessarily reflective of your community doesn't like sports. It's just simply the fact that there's a specific skill and a very specific age group that uses your athletic field. So I think it's fair to say that those numbers would be and it should be expected to be lower than general parks and trails as a whole. As far as rating the quality of your facilities, excellent, good, fair, poor, 31% and 32% for general parks and trails, and then a little bit lower with regards to multi-purpose fields and diamond fields. But again, when you start adding in that good column as well, It's not as if we're talking about a system that's not in good shape. I mean, the lowest number there is a combination of excellent and good is 69%. So almost 7 out of every 10 people rate your diamond fields being either in excellent or good condition. The national benchmark for excellent, again, is 29%. So you do exceed that for general parks and trails, but you are a little bit lower than that for multi-purpose fields and diamond fields.
Mayor, real quick question.
Councilmember Orlando.
Thank you. So you have a little caveat in here says, doesn't count the don't knows.
I'm sorry?
You have a caveat on here, this number doesn't count the don't knows or respond to don't know?
Correct.
What's that percentage?
There were not very many don't
Okay.
knows. You can see that based on the folks that here, it's 100% for everything. But generally speaking, given the fact that you have this kind of usage associated with your general parks and trails, multi-purpose fields and diamond athletic fields are a little bit less. So if you're not using, then you can't rate the condition. So the general parks is rated based on the 88% of folks that have used it within the last year. The trails is based on the 49% of folks that have used it in the last year. And then the same thing for diamond and athletic. As far as the overall satisfaction of the physical condition, very satisfied was at 22, satisfied was at 58. So that is 80% of your community is pretty happy with the physical condition. In other words, how things are continuing to be taken care of and how you're reinvesting in the system. In terms of awareness and marketing, and I think this is really important because there is a lot of ways in which people can now learn about park systems than they did previously. But in terms of why they have not visited parks, only 13% of folks indicated that they were not aware of parks, trails, or locations. Another way to say that is simply the fact that they either choose to use them or they choose not to use them. Not everybody is interested in using parks, not everybody is interested in using trails, but the fact that 87% of your community is aware of your park and trail system means that you're doing a great job in terms of creating awareness. I think it's really important to point out that the do not feel safe, which is about halfway down the page, is only 3%. The national benchmark for do not feel safe is really closer to 13 or 14%. So that is a really good indication and statement on the safety of your community and the work that not only Parks puts in, but also your public safety does as well. In terms of how people learn about parks and trails, the number one way is friends and neighbors. Now, if we were talking recreation programs, I would be a little more concerned because recreation programs come and go and they change. And many times people talk about their experiences about a recreation program after it has happened. Whereas a park and trail system is fixed. In other words, you can choose to go and see that or participate in it or visit or use it anytime you want. The only thing that the friends and neighbors would give you a little cause for pause for is simply the fact that a friend and or neighbor may only be telling you about a very specific park or a very specific experience in a very specific park. And so they don't necessarily communicate everything about your park system. But the second highest way of people learning is the city website and then the activity guide. We also wanted to ask people not just how they learn, but what their preference is. So the friends and neighbors drops almost all the way down to 2/3 down the list. Instead of it being they learning about it 60% through friends and neighbors, They actually only prefer to learn about it from friends and neighbors at 14%. The key here is that the top 4 are all within your control. You control the messaging on the city website. You control the messaging associated with emails, the activity guide, and your Facebook account. So it's important to recognize that you have complete control of how you want to inform your community. But the other thing that this does is it gives you an understanding of where you spend marketing resources and dollars when it comes to letting people know and creating awareness about your park and trail system. So program and service needs, and this is really about the experiences that folks want out of their park and trail system. There's in terms of importance, so what people feel is important, there's a clear-cut top 3. Walking, jogging, biking, hiking was number 1, closely followed by just generally visiting and using parks. And then third is somehow, some way getting fitness and wellness out of your park and trail system, whether that be informally or formally. And it drops way off to, swimming, socializing with dogs or dog parks, fishing and nature programs kind of make up that. I would love to say it's a second tier, but it's way off a second tier. So you have a very clear-cut top 3 in terms of importance. But it's also important to recognize that just because something is important and needed, that we need to create a system that meets unmet needs. So when we talk about where folks have a need for programs and services that are being met at 50% or less, fitness and wellness, outdoor adventure programs, nature programs, walking, jogging, hiking, biking. So 2 of your top 4 that are most important are also 2 of the programs and services that folks have an unmet need for. And so I think it's important to recognize that your community wants to get out. Yes.
So just a question on this, estimated numbers, is this based upon just the geography or the responses and then extrapolating from there?
Correct.
Or how do we come to this?
Correct. It is. It's based on exactly what you just said.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mayor.
Councilmember Orlando.
Thank you, sir. So let's take a look at this chart here, and I guess I'm trying to figure out what you're talking about. I mean, I understand what you're saying here, but when I look at softball or baseball, and I take that as a diamond sport
Correct.
versus tennis, which is a court, which is a court for sand volleyball. There's amenities that handle a sport.
Correct.
Handle that. So when I put these numbers together, like youth soccer and adult soccer, I come up with over 10,000, close to 11,000 households that are looking at that, whether it's an adult or a youth, are looking for soccer fields. When I look at baseball, softball, both youth and adult, I'm looking at over close to 15,000, which makes both of those jump up into the top 10. So how do we adjudicate for that? I mean, we split that up. We didn't split up basketball or tennis ball or pickleball, some of these other sports. So when I look at planning for the future, I'm looking at diamonds needed, whether it's for adults or youth, and they're multiple. Both can play on those fields at different times of the day.
Correct.
So how does that equate to the picture where I have, like I said, top 10, 2 of those sports in Chandler, and they're growing sports, by the way. So how do we adjudicate that?
So the city manager said it best in her preamble, that this is one data point. And community need does not trump all. And I think the best way to explain this is that we have to not just recognize what you have in terms of need or unmet need in your community, but we have to use other factors such as facility location, a number of facilities. What we talk about is level of service. And so recognizing, even if you feel as if right now that you're meeting needs, your community is going to continue to grow and these sports are going to continue to grow. And so It's about taking this information and interfacing it with a lot more technical data that we are going to share with you later on, either this year or early next year, that talks about level of service. How many fields do you need for every 5,000 people in your community? Where are those fields located? So that there's equitable access to them throughout your community, so that folks don't have to feel as if they need to drive from the very, western edge of Chandler to get to fields in, North Chandler, for
Yeah,
example.
I see what you're saying, and I know where you're driving at, but my main point here is, it's a little bit, if I'm going to base this on data, it's a little, we have to tweak it a little bit here, because again, both of these drop into the top 10, 6th and 7th respectively, if I'm looking at what the Chandler residents want. So I understand what you're saying, but I still don't feel like we're giving them the credit due of the fact that there's needs for diamond facilities out there. Now, whether there's a need or maintaining, or, we're going to keep it where they are, that's a different story.
Sure.
But still, if I'm going to base it on data, I have to be true to myself and say, there's a lot of numbers out here that are just not being correlated to the top 10. And I go back to the previous chart where you look at most important to the household. Again, if I add those two up, they both of those, 9 and 10, go back into the top 10 above basketball and special events. So again, I'm trying to figure out, how do I take those, you divided those up, which I get that because they're specific sports. But by the same token, we still have to take them as a sport of needing facilities. Whether there's enough, that's a different story. But if we're going to base our data on this, I'm concerned that we're not basing on truly what we need, what is asking by the residents.
So I think the one point of clarity that I would like to make is that an adult softball field is different than a youth baseball field in terms of size, in terms of outfield fences. And so when I speak about doing level of service, we're not just going to do it based on a diamond field blanket. We're not going to do it just based on a rectangular field blanket. We are going to base it on the type of field that is necessary to carry that very specific activity and or sport. And so again, it's not to, I think the one thing that needs to be stated is that when you start talking about things like fitness and wellness programs, and you start talking about walking, jogging, hiking, biking, those are things that are available and typically accessible to the community as a whole. When we start talking about very specific sports, it becomes about a very specific age and a very specific skill set. And so it's expected that sport fields in a city-wide park system would be at a lower rating than, say, a trail system, because everybody has access and potentially can use a trail system, where a lot of folks, quite honestly, 90% of your community is not interested in playing on a baseball field or a soccer field. But those folks, when you think about 10% of your community in doing so, and you think about your population, we're talking 25, 28,000 people. And so we have to take that into consideration. Again, this is not meant to be the end all be all. It's just presenting information that in turn helps us later on to recognize where you're at in terms of level of service and where your system needs to go in the future.
So I understand what you're saying, and I get it. Trust me, I'm not trying to be argumentative here. But my point to you, though, is we could be very successful as creating adult baseball, softball fields, and with a fence, a portable fence, turn those into youth softball fields. And we've had youth fields for the longest time I've been here, since 1977, that we've had youth field, youth adult fields. So we're not going to, I don't want to get into a discussion about, are we going to make a little league field or a baseball field or 15 of these, 12 of those? My point is, we could be, and if you look at a soccer field, that easily could be a multi-use field for football, flag football. So again, I don't want to send a message here that that baseball or softball or soccer or flag football or whatever, lacrosse, are not important.
No,
They
that-
are important. They're extremely important to
Agreed.
the community. I get these calls every day about the lack of facilities in that area. So again, I'll let you move on here, but I just want to be aware that the data here, to me, if you look at it, take it piece by piece, it doesn't give you a bigger, you need to piece it all together to get a bigger picture is what I'm trying to suggest.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We are on 100% same page.
And I would add to that, I agree somewhat with Councilmember Orlando this is good information to break it out, but when it actually then comes to planning facilities, that's where the aggregate look of the 6 sports listed here, so that can use a multi-purpose field, then I would aggregate them and say, as we plan these, so I understand. I think they're both valuable points, but that's going to come in the later data that you mentioned at a future time. So I'm glad they're broken out, but I also, in my mind, I was also adding these up to say, well, yeah, I could see diamond fields or multi-use fields and then having a greater percentage. And that's just something for us to keep in mind when more data comes to us and we're actually digesting the entire report. So,
Agreed. Agreed. Thank you.
all right. Please continue.
Any other questions?
I'm not seeing any from my side.
Okay.
Oh, Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. So I think there's another way to sort of look at this. When I look at the 17 different sports that are on that particular slide we were just looking at, when you break out all the different sports, yeah, if my family or my neighbor's family doesn't play lacrosse, they don't necessarily have a need for lacrosse. But when you add it to lacrosse, to soccer, to football, those are multi-purpose fields, and you could kind of combine all those. And maybe that's a methodology we can look at on another meeting later today, where we can kind of combine these, so we can look at, okay, what can be played on those sports, so we can then look at the aggregate of that data, so we can make a better decision. Because I think, and we could do it manually right here on my knee, but I think the bigger question I had here is the estimated number of households whose needs for programs are met 50% or less. Can you go into that a little bit more? Because when I look at fitness and wellness, I just think, okay, whatever you're doing, you could ride a bike, you could, you could play whatever, and you're doing fitness and wellness. Is this thing saying that 75% of Chandler residents are comfortable with our fitness and wellness based on that top line? And then when you go down, some of these, like say pickleball, that were underutilized, were underserved?
Well, I think it's probably safe to say, anecdotally, concrete, that we're not there yet in terms of being able to respond to that very specific question. This is just, as the city manager said, a specific piece of data that will help us inform other recommendations that come out of having to do a facility inventory and assessment, equity mapping to understand how well your city is covered and served. I think we fully recognize, without even doing mapping, that you're likely lacking athletic fields in the southern part of your community, for example. And so it's not just about this specific information. There's a lot of other data yet to be had that will help to inform the strategicness of the recommendations that come forward.
I'm with you, and you had mentioned that, and I love that we're going to be like, this is just a data point. I just want to know what the data point is. I'm looking at the bar graph, and I just want to make, so like on fitness and wellness, this means that people are pretty happy with our fitness and wellness.
Yes.
Okay, based on
Yes.
700 respondents, like, or
Correct.
was it 800 respondents? When you add in people that sort of went through the survey online, and then the people that you called or emailed directly from the database from our athletic department, correct?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
May I,
Vice Mayor.
to make it maybe a correct statement, just maybe understanding, because the question was on what is important to them, not necessarily if they're satisfied with it, right? That they're setting their priority, again, out of the respondents, top 3 here, again, a majority of them as first, second, third choice, said these are the most important to them. Not necessarily they're satisfied or not, whether we have enough or not, but this is the importance level, correct?
Well, this is where they have unmet needs. The importance level is here.
Am I on the wrong slide? Which slide are you on?
The importance
Report
level was
presentation.
the slide before that.
Oh, I'm on the wrong slide then. Sorry.
Yeah, I was talking about the next slide, Vice Mayor.
Okay. All right, so now I'm on the right slide. Continue. Sorry.
I think it's important to recognize that when you look at this information, the information that the data that we're getting back, it's very important to recognize that the things that typically rise to the top are the things that are available to the community as a whole, regardless of skill set and regardless of age. So I think that is why we have to do that and that further digging to understand where things are at when we start talking about athletic fields or things along those lines. So you're going to see the same kind of information when I go through the park and facility amenity needs. And so this is the facility. So this is the actual infrastructure that people want in your system. Paved and walking biking trails was number 1. Covered picnic areas, ramadas, was number 2. And then you have a whole bunch there that are kind of bunched up in your top 6. Soft surface trails, open space conservation area trails, large community parks, small community parks. So you can see that, though, to kind of piggyback off of Councilmember Orlando's comments, if you were to combine all those trails, you start to recognize that trails is exceptionally important to your community, whether it be paved, whether it be soft surface, whether it be trails in an open space conservation area. So again, this is not surprising because trails across the entire country is always the most important thing. But it's because if you think about folks can go out and walk, they can teach their kid to ride a bike, they can push a stroller, they can run, they can hike. And so the other thing that I think I wanted to add is that the number 1 activity in this country, by far, off the chart, is walking for exercise. Almost 1 out of every 3 people in this country walk for exercise. Even though it doesn't get the fanfare that all the sports does, it is also then why trails is always so important. In terms of unmet needs, interestingly enough, community gardens jumps to the top. And then you have your trails, an adventure area, something like ropes courses, zip lines, certainly not something that typically a city directly provides, but it does have the ability to partner with the private sector to do that. And then trails and splash pads. So again, the things that are most available and what the general community wants are what typically rises to the top. And then when you start breaking things down by specific skill set and specific age, you start to get lower responses. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're in a position at this point of saying you don't need any more athletic fields. That's not the case.
I'm a little bit surprised about question 12, program most important to household, about the low percentage of youth softball. To my personal experience, it looks like youth softball are very popular in Chandler.
I think it's just softball actually has started to be on a decline. If that's what you're referring to. Softball across the country has kind of been in a state of decline over the last decade or so. It has ebbed and flowed. There are certain parts of this country in which it's been exceptionally popular and remains exceptionally popular. I can tell you from my own very specific interest when I was a Parks and Recreation Director in Virginia, we had over 150 adult softball teams in the early to mid 2000s. I asked them today how many softball teams they have. They're lucky to have 50 every season. It's just something that has ebbed and flowed. It's one of those things that I think when we look at your demand for softball, adult softball in your community, to Councilmember Orlando's point, is do we have an opportunity to take that field, for example, and convert it or renovate it in such a way that it almost becomes a multi-purpose at Diamond Athletic Field. In many cases, we have long been just building diamond athletic fields that are very specific to age and or use. But with the portable fencing, you have an opportunity to create a multi-purpose use out of it, similarly to what we do with rectangular fields.
Mayor. So you bring up a good point. And I understand parts of the community. I grew up back east, and I remember the days we had men's softball, fast pitch softball. They don't have it anymore, it's just not there. Many corporations sponsored men's teams and women's teams. But if you look at the Arizona, California, Nevada, New Mexico market, softball's huge. In fact, in this city alone, you probably have 4 of the top 10 to 12 softball high schools. Okay, in the state, you've had one high school here that's won the championship like the last 4 out of 5 years. You have one up at Pinnacle on the west side. So how do we, I guess my question to you is, I understand what you're saying nationwide, I understand what you're saying, but there are unique situations. In fact, so Arizona was one of the original softball entities in the United States. There was championship teams right out of Arizona in the 1900s. So I hear what you're saying, but club softball, club soccer are huge out here. Every weekend, we could probably put a tournament on every weekend. Rosemont and some of the other facilities in this town, baseball is huge. So I can understand what you're saying, some parts of the nation, but again, there has to be some weighted measure on this to take into account that those activities are very popular in this area.
They're very important to a very specific part of the population, absolutely. And I think the one thing that we will start to have a discussion on very specifically around athletic fields in the future is, are we providing athletic fields for the purposes of meeting local need, or are we potentially in the business of trying to provide athletic fields that draw sports tourism? For example, club soccer has a tendency to be very parochial. They have a tendency to play in a very small geographic area. Yes, they'll travel to California for that weekend tournament occasionally, but most of their games happen a little bit more locally. Girls fast pitch softball, because there's not nearly the number of girls fast pitch softball players as there are, say, club youth soccer, have a tendency to have to travel a lot more, just simply because you don't have the demand at such a hyper local level that you do for such things as soccer. So I do think that it will be a very worthwhile conversation to have. I also think that we have to inform our recommendations based on other things that may be occurring in the city of Mesa through the private sector as well. And you know, I think at the end of the day, one of the things that we have to fully take into account is that anything you build not just comes with the cost to build it, but it comes with a cost to maintain it. And it also comes with a cost to life cycle replace it, because nothing that you build lasts forever. So we need to ensure that the recommendations create financial sustainability for you as well.
Councilmember Wong.
So your survey or statistics was basically done between March to June, right? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and my hypothesis is, I think COVID-19 changed a lot of things,
Yes.
and that probably affect your survey. To my knowledge, right now it's very popular about walking, biking, jogging right now. And for other sports, kind of decreasing or even out of the game. And I still like to say, to my experience, youth softball is pretty popular here, and also baseball are also very popular in Chandler or West Arizona area. But your surveys indicate the kind of opposite. And my thought would be this could be affected serious by the COVID-19. It's a little bit seasonable situation. But this is just my hypothesis.
Yes, it is very possible that COVID and the time in which this survey was put out did have some direct influence, which is why I think it's very important to recognize that we have a lot of other data points that need to feed into this.
So last question following up with Councilmember Wong, or maybe not the last question. You know, when you're using the phrase statistically valid survey, is that generally something that is accepted beyond the extraordinary conditions of a pandemic that changes people's lives? Or, I mean, just generally speaking with that, or is that something that if you would do this survey in 6 months from now, would you generally say that the 3.8 deviation would be true, or would that also be impacted by the timing?
No, I think it's safe to say, I wish I had a direct aim. I wish somebody could tell me how the pandemic has impacted everything. But I can tell you by looking at these survey results and comparing them to the survey that we did in Scottsdale 5 years ago, or surveys that we've done in other parts of Arizona, specifically just within the last year before the pandemic, that these results are consistent with what you would see. And here's simply why. The simple part of this is that when you ask the community as a whole what they find important and what they find unmet needs, the greater numbers are always going to be shown with the folks that can engage in things like general park visitation or trails. The lesser numbers are always going to be shown in the more age-specific, skill-specific areas. I think it's an important stat to recognize that when we talk about athletics, we talk about team athletics, 85% of kids drop out of sports, team sports, by the time they're 13. It does not mean that we don't continue to provide athletic fields, but we just know that kids move on because their skills don't advance to the point where they're having fun. It starts to get competitive, and they're just not good enough, or they find other things to do. So I think it's important to recognize that there's a lot of information that is going to go into the recommendations. This is just the statistically valid survey. A lot of other data points will resonate.
All right. Vice Mayor.
Would it also probably be safe to say, I'm going to put you on the spot here though, but if they're a softball fan, a family that's involved in youth soccer, a pandemic isn't going to stop that importance. I would think that it was important to them before, it's important to them during, it's going to be important after.
Maybe
So,
they're on that cusp of 12 to 13-year-olds, but and deciding
but,
whether or
yeah.
not they want to continue.
Yeah.
Yes. But I think, sports have been around for, why is soccer, I think, the fourth most participated in activity in the country? It's because it has created over the last 50 years a really nationwide sport, so that regardless of where you go, it's expected that you have soccer,
Right.
just like it's expected that you have baseball, or to a lesser extent, probably now football.
Yeah, thank you.
So we did specifically about athletic fields. We wanted to ask, are they easily accessible based on their current locations? And I think it's important to recognize that we asked some very specific questions about athletic fields because we knew it was going to be a topic. It resonated in the community engagement through the website, why we did a focus group with sports field groups. But 86% of folks are pretty happy with the athletic fields at their current locations in terms of being accessible. Again, that does not preclude the condition rating assessment that we talked about earlier. It's just a matter of how accessible they are. But we will do additional mapping and inventory to try to understand how the growth and density of your community is going to impact this answer 5, 10, 15 years from now. So public support, and this is where the rubber starts to meet the road. So we asked a series of questions, or not a series of questions, but gave people a series of choices as to where they had support for any one of these specific actions. General repair and maintenance of parks, continuing to do that was by far number one. Improve your existing trail system was by far number two. Was number two, and then adding walking loop trails in existing parks, because people don't necessarily always want a long linear system. They just want a place to go walk. And then number three was improve restroom facilities. And then 4 was generally develop parks that have the highest need. So of the top 5 there, 3 of them, folks are most interested in you investing in your existing system or reinvesting in your existing system. That's the big takeaway. And then, of course, developing new trails came in number 6. So we asked a lot of folks, again, this is the community as a whole, and you start to look at, let's look at where improve existing athletic fields. It's your top 10. And this could be repurposing existing athletic fields. It could be improving them. It could be creating multi-purpose athletic fields out of things that are very fixed right now. It could be that we need to upgrade the maintenance on those. So it is on the first page. When we start talking about developing new sports facilities, it does leak out of kind of the first page here, but it is at the top of the second page. And so I think the thing that is really important to recognize, when even on this very first page, what people support, whether it's very supportive or somewhat supportive, at a minimum, 60% of folks are either very supportive or somewhat supportive of developing a new area for community events. And that was during COVID. So I think it's important to recognize that people still feel like community events are important to your community. And then when you even get to the top of the next page, it isn't until you get down to add more dog parks that the number of very supportive and somewhat supportive falls below 50%. But this is the dream list, right? Now, what are they most willing to fund? And this is where we see a lot of consistency. In fact, your top 6 here, maybe not the exact same order in terms of what they're willing to fund, is by far consistent with what they have support for. Unfortunately, none of these numbers are over 50%. So what they're saying, what I'm hearing is that, and I think when you ask this question, people interpret it as that you want more of their money to do these things. The way I interpret question 13 and question 14 is simply they want you to use the existing funds in this specific way. If they were to actually have to pay more money, almost 50% of your community would be interested in doing so to repair and increase maintenance of your existing park system. But everything else starts to trail off. All right, so again, community needs, this is just an initial snapshot. It is not meant to in any way, shape, or form mean that things on the low priority that you're not going to invest in and or expand. The one thing that we have to fully recognize is that if you were in a community that wasn't growing or was in some cases, like some communities that we worked in, losing population, then we would not be in a position of adding things that were on the low priority. But simply because of your growth, to maintain a specific level of service, your existing level of service, which we haven't determined what that is, we simply, absolutely, positively are going to have to invest in your park system across all spectrums, whether it be low, medium, or high. We may end up not being able to do some very specific things because geography, parkland don't allow you to do it. But it simply means that you have an opportunity or will have a need to invest in experiences as to help support the needs of your community. When we looked at just the high priorities and we looked at how they compared citywide to each of the 4 park planning areas, you can see that there's a lot of consistency. You have a clear top 5 in terms of just high priorities as of right now, citywide. That's consistent with the north, 4 out of the top 5 in the southeast, all of the top 5 in the southwest, plus fishing, and then just 3 things are most important to people that currently live in the West Chandler park planning area. Again, same thing, but you can see that the high priority investment in parks, facilities, and amenities is much greater. Almost, I think it's pretty much a top 10 there. And it's pretty consistent with the importance and unmet needs. Again, I will state, you are going to continue to grow over the next 10 years. If you are to, at the very least, maintain an existing level of service, you're going to have to expand your park system across the board, high, medium, to low. Again, in terms of consistency, a lot of consistency. In fact, this is where the West catches up with the city as a whole. The West Park planning area is exactly the same in terms of your high priorities as the city as a whole. The north is really close, but instead of large community parks, they want splash pads. Southeast is a little bit more diverse. And then the southwest has very specific needs: trails, community gardens, trails, and ramadas. So what this helps us do is it starts to help us frame, when you think about having a park, whether you're redeveloping an existing park or you're talking about building new, it creates a good foundation on which to get into site-specific master planning. Is it the end-all be-all? Absolutely not. Can we put athletic fields in every park? No, because every park isn't large enough. Every park won't have the parking. It won't have the restrooms. It won't have, you won't be able to manage traffic. But these start to create the basic foundation, basic needs that people want out of a park system. And then as you go forward, as we introduce all of those other data points, we absolutely positively will start to understand where, for example, you need more athletic fields. So our next steps, I think I've covered a lot of this during our dialogue, but we have the virtual community meeting tomorrow. As Mr. Bass said, we have 60 folks registered as of right now. We are going to get into that level of service standards and geographic analysis. We will have a capital improvement plan for you to consider over the course of the next 10 years. We absolutely positively, as I said, will create funding and revenue strategies. We are going to root this entire master plan in what we call total cost of ownership: capital investment, operations and maintenance dollars necessary to manage that capital investment, and then to be able to plan for life cycle replacement. Even if it's a playground, a splash pad, athletic field lighting, none of that stuff lasts forever. Some of it has a much longer shelf life than others, but we want to make sure that you go into making decisions eyes wide open regarding your costs. Asset management plan is really, how do you take your operations and maintenance dollars and manage every asset and infrastructure in your park system so that it reaches its life cycle? buy a new car, don't have enough money to change the oil. How long is that car going to last? Same concept with everything that you build in a park system. And then, of course, the strategic action plan and the final master plan. So these are kind of really our next steps over the next 5 months. We hope to be back in front of you later this fall, and then have an opportunity to have, I think, a really more robust conversation that interfaces this specific set of data with all the other data that's yet to come.
Councilmember Huang.
Thank you very much for your presentation and your study and analysis. I have been listening to you and looking over your presentation. I found there's something that was missing, is that our master plan should not just only based on the residents' opinion. Of course, that's very important.
Sure.
Yeah. But also it should be linked to the development of the city. For example, economic development. And it has been a very popular thought to connect economic development with the sport and recreation programs or facilities. So I do not see you including that part in this study. So yeah.
Correct. I think it is a question we actually asked in focus groups of folks. I think it's important to recognize that being in this business, Parks and Recreation, even if you go back to the very, very, very first slide, and you think about how people responded to how a parks and trails system impacts their quality of life. 95% of your folks either agreed, strongly agreed or agreed with that statement. I think quality of life is a very blanket statement that has a tendency to get thrown out. Park systems have a way of creating economic development and impact in your community through sports tourism, through providing strong parks and public parks that actually align with the employer and the employee base of your community. And it also has a way of potentially drawing new residents to your community as well. So I think it's more than just the sports tourism side of the equation, but I agree, and I think that is going to be a very strong theme that comes out of this very specific master plan.
Yeah.
Councilmember.
So I would like to recommend you put that into your thoughts, and when you come out with some kind of recommendation to the council or to our staff about economic development, and I assume you are going to make some recommendations.
Yes.
At the end. So yeah, what kind of equipment or facility we need to improve, or even build something new or program we should focus on.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think an illustration of perhaps a Councilmember Wong's, if we were able to, which we're not because we don't have the space, to have landed this Taiwanese semiconductor plant in Chandler, would that impact the sports planning of the future? I mean, I think that's an economic development type of thought. Would it create a need for niche sports, et cetera?
I think that's really important to recognize. So currently doing a project in Loudoun County, Virginia, which is outside of DC, which is currently the most affluent county in the country. They have a exceptionally strong, for example, data center business, just purely on the data center side of the equation, and then looking to build their office complex side of the equation. Long story short, one of the big recommendations that is starting to percolate is that there is a need for more cricket fields. And so the more ethnically diverse you become, we also know that ethnicity equals culture, and culture has a way of influencing park and recreation demands and needs. And so we need to take that into consideration as we go forward. Cricket fields, for example, require a lot of land. And that's part of why when we start talking about your system, we have to look at not just because your land isn't, you just don't have an abundance of available land to build new parks. We have to talk about how do we make your existing parks the most productive that they can within the footprint that exists for them.
Great. So, Councilmember Rowe.
Thank, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Spence, thank you for your presentation. I may have missed the slide of the discussion, but do we have some indicator on what percentage of 300,000 Chandler residents don't even use a park?
12%.
12%. So
That's pretty small.
a lot of other people, most of the population uses parks on a regular basis, is what you're saying.
The national benchmark for using parks in any community across the country is 78%. So you are 10% above that.
So, and then the other thing is and I know that there's good reason for this, but for me, it would seem like our school district and all their facilities should play a part in this discussion. And if it doesn't, that's problematic. And so that's something that we should work on trying to cure. And then the other thing is that the senior center, our senior facility, I know that that's a separate discussion, but yet I think it's very important and should be part of this. So that's my input. Thank you.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Councilmember Orlando.
Thank you very much. This is really good data. Again, I think we could tweak the edges, which I think you plan on doing anyway. And I was going to go back to the cricket fields because, again, we have a microchip, we have Intel, we have other companies here that the Asian population, there's several Sundays we go out by our parks and you'll see a cricket game going on. So I think that's important for recruiting and retention of people as well. As you indicated earlier, that's a part of economic development because if you can recruit and retain those folks and they have their culture, whether it's cricket or some other activity, I agree 100%. It does go hand in hand. It helps our corporations to recruit and retain, as well as making sure the amenities are there for the employees when they are off work. So I appreciate that. The other thing is, as go back to what Councilmember Rose said, we are seeing, at least in some of the leagues here, where they're looking for practice fields. That's a huge issue in Chandler. I'm sure you've got that from our staff. It's gotten to the point where, they use some school fields, but they're also using HOA facilities. And as an organization, and I'll use softball as an example, we provide certificate of insurance for those folks to use those HOA, quote, privately owned fields. And over the last few years, we've issued probably a dozen of those certificate of liabilities because they can't find the practice fields in order to, and there's lights involved. Of course, at the summertime, we want to keep the lights here. So that's an issue we're facing. So whether we could utilize other amenities to help in our park plan, whether it's schools or other facilities, that's something we need to hopefully take a look at.
It is actually a very hot topic across the country. And I think there's a couple of factors associated with access to school grounds. One, I think, is school safety.
Right.
But two, I think it also has to do with the availability of resources at a school district level to maintain those spaces at an athletic field level, even if it's just practices.
Yeah.
So one of the things that has worked well in some other communities that we've worked is to create a joint use agreement in which you contribute to the maintenance of those athletic fields, because the contributions of that is much less year over year than you going and trying to buy land, build new athletic fields. So maximize what you have in your backyard. The other thing associated with schools is that typically they're geographically balanced and located in such a way that it makes access to them for your kids and your families so much easier. They don't have to travel to a sports complex or a community park. they can just go practice. They'll do the games at the sports complexes. So I do think that that is an exceptional strategic thought that we need to piggyback off of and really create some strong recommendations. And in fact, we'll make a mental note here and a physical note to talk with the school district to at the very least start to cut at the edges with regards to what that conversation
And
might
we
look
do
like.
have some joint agreements. Bogle's a good example. We use Bogle for our practices. So we do have, that's a junior high school. So we have started that process. Now the question is, how do we expand that process? In other words, so that we could be able to, again, maybe don't have to build a lot of these practice fields. We could just concentrate on some of the main things and utilize schools or other entities for practice fields, something like that.
Agreed. Practice fields are in higher demand than game fields.
Yeah, exactly.
People always want to practice more.
All right, thank you, Mayor.
All right, any questions on the right? Comments? Any more on the left? I want to thank you. This has been very illuminating to me. And just seeing this type of survey, I'd gotten stories that it was maybe we often hear from probably irate parents more often than anything else, that either something is not right, the lights aren't on a field or this or this, but to have a higher level presentation that talks to more what I would call a silent majority of Chandler residents and their athletic needs is different information than we normally receive as council members. So I found this quite helpful, and entering it into the process of information as we go to make the final park recommendations and see how that fits in with our capital improvement projects. So thank you. With that, I would like to, City Manager, anything else?
No, Mayor, thank you.
All right, that concludes our study session. We shall meet in 15 minutes, 16 minutes for our first council meeting to start.
higher ground. We'll be safe and sound. Reach for me. Should have known right away when it felt too good to be true. 'Cause you never said what you mean to say. So anyway, you look at it, I'm confused. You can't see where this is gonna lead. Reach for me. Don't wanna wait another day without you. Take me to higher ground. Come on, reach for me. I can't wait another day without you. Take me to higher ground. We'll be safe and sound. Reach for me. Reach for me. Got it all figured out. You decide what's best for you. 'Cause you built me up, so don't let me down. I can't make you do what you don't want to. You can't see where this is gonna lead. Reach for me. Don't wanna wait another day without you. Take me to higher ground. Come on, reach for me. I can't wait another day without you. Oh, Mr. Blackbird sitting in the tree, why don't you come down and sing to me about all the people that you see as you travel around the world? Oh, Mr. Blackbird sitting in the tree, why don't you come down and sing to me about all the people that you see as you travel around the world? Oh, Mr. Blackbird sitting in the tree, why don't you come down and sing to me about all the people that you see as you travel around the world? Oh, Mr. Blackbird sitting in the tree, why don't you come down and sing to me about all the people that you see as you travel around the world? Oh, Mr. Blackbird sitting in the tree, why don't you come down and sing to me about all the people that you see as you travel around the world?
Well, good evening and welcome to our Chandler City Council chambers, as well as those of you who are watching online. Tonight, we had a work study session relating to a master park plan. We have a short city council meeting, and then most of you who are present will then be participating in our Chandler study session, and then we have another meeting after that. So, clerk, start us by calling us to order.
Mayor
Roll call.
Harkey. Mayor Harkey.
Here.
Vice Mayor Lopez.
Here.
Councilmember Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember McClymans.
Here.
Councilmember Wong.
Here.
Councilmember Rowe.
Here.
Councilmember Orlando.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Clerk. Our invocation tonight will be offered by Pastor Larry Lee of the Greater Phoenix Chinese Christian Church and our Pledge of Allegiance by Councilmember Mark Stewart. Pastor.
I want to thank the mayor, I want to thank the city council for continuing to open up your means of an invocation. And let's just come before God in prayer. Dear God, I thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to gather here together with these dear brothers and sisters. And Father, we pray for forgiveness if we've acted or even thought anything that is unbecoming of a child who's made in your image. We pray for forgiveness. We thank you for just how you blessed us with this wonderful land that we live in, an opportunity to be able to live the life that you called us to live. And Father, we entrust this meeting into your hands. We pray for our mayor, for our city council, that you may bless them and their families, that you may give them health, strength, protection, give them great wisdom on how to govern this city. And Father, we commit this meeting into your hands. We pray that all the decisions that are made here today may be able to bring about peace within this country, within this city, within this state, and within this country. And Father, we come before you because you are able to do immeasurably more than we could ever be able to ask or even to imagine, according to the power that is at work within us. And Father, to you be the glory. And Father, we commit all into your mighty hands. In your Son's precious name, we do pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor Lee. Thank you, Councilmember Stewart. Council, tonight we have two items on our consent agenda, minutes and a final ordinance of the Arches Climbing and Fitness, which interestingly fits into our Parks Master Plan potentially in terms of adventure type of experience for our community. Council, what's your pleasure? Vice Mayor.
I move the approval for the Monday, September 14th regular meeting. Consent agenda, items 1 through 2.
Second. So we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments, Council? Seeing none, please vote.
Motion carries unanimously.
Very good. And that concludes our regular council meeting. Next on our agenda is a study session for Monday, September 14th, 2020. So we're calling to order. We have a number of, which I'm very glad to see, of recognitions as well as Employees of the Year and a proclamation tonight. I would like to invite Councilmember Rowe to join me in front of the dais, please. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Start out by asking Kim Moyers, our Cultural Development Director, to come forward and make her presentation.
Mayor, Council, tonight we have Judy Johnson, who is celebrating her 20 years with the City of Chandler. While Judy may be officially celebrating 20 years with the city, she has been with the Chandler Center for the Arts since 1995, when she started as a part-time marketing assistant. Judy was the center's very first marketing coordinator. Judy's passion and commitment for the center is evident with her unwavering commitment to the program she has touted for more than 20 years. Every day she works to bring awareness to the center and is always there to lend a hand when a co-worker is in need. Judy is a key component to the center's member relations. It is her smiling face that longtime members and supporters look for when they're entering and coming to the performances. She is instrumental in getting marketing materials out to the public through various media sources, which have changed dramatically over the last 20 years. Judy has been a vital contributor to the center's success, and we appreciate all of her efforts. Please help me congratulate Judy on 20 years of service.
I would ask Derek Horn, Development Services Director, to come forward and make his presentations.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have the privilege of having actually two recognitions tonight. First, I'd like to ask Adon Clemente, would you please come forward? Adon currently serves as Public Works Inspector in the Telecommunications and Utility Franchise Division of Development Services. During Adon's 15 years of service with the city, he also served as a materials tester and code enforcement officer. Those experiences provided Adon a good foundation for his current role. Adon's work focuses on ensuring the private utility infrastructure constructed in the city, such as gas, electric, and communication facilities, are built quickly and safely, and in a way that minimizes impacts to the residents and businesses of Chandler. He also ensures the restoration of the city's right-of-way to a condition that is equal or better than before the utility work began. Adon's work facilitates keeping utility and communication services available for our citizens and businesses for commerce, remote work, education, and especially during this time of pandemic. Thank you and congratulations, Adon, on your 15 years of service to Chandler. Next, Terry Fitzhugh, would you please come forward? Terry started her career with the City of Chandler in 1995. She began working as a zoning inspector in the Planning and Neighborhood Services Department. Later, she was transferred to the Planning Department to join a new work group called Site Development. She has been the senior inspector since 2010. She inspects all new and renovated building projects for conformance with the zoning code. She has been very busy during her years of service and influenced much of the city you see today. Terry was recently elected by her peers as Development Services Employee of the Year. Terry will remember the amazing friendships she has made during her years at Chandler and hopes to keep in touch with many of them long after she retires next month. Her plans after retirement will include more volunteer work in the community, travel to new places, and of course, lots of movies as the theaters reopen. Her two adult children and teenage grandkids will also occupy her spare time. Thank you, Terry, for 25 years of service to the city of Chandler, and enjoy your retirement.
And for the last recognition tonight, I would ask Sandeep Dalakia, our Chief Information Officer and Director of IT, to come forward and make the presentation.
At this time, I'd like to invite Faye Peng, or Belinda as we all call her. Belinda has served the city as a database administrator for the past 10 years. She is instrumental, and brace yourself, this is going to get highly technical, capacity planning, installations, configuration, database design, migration, performance monitoring, of course, security, troubleshooting, backup, data recovery, and of course, ensuring that the city's data is always safe and available. In addition to performing her job role, she always demonstrates a thirst for knowledge and continuous improvement. When challenged to explore new technologies such as data warehousing and artificial intelligence, she's eager to accept the challenge and make a difference for staff and the citizens of Chandler. Belinda, we thank you for your 10 years of service and contributions to the city, and we're excited for what the future holds for you.
Mayor, would you like me to move into the Employees of the Year recognition? All right, thank you. So it is that time of year again where our Employee Advisory Committee does seek nominations from everyone in the city. And then our departments, as Derek mentioned a while ago, actually vote on who they feel like should be their Employee of the Year. And it is a very special time for the departments to do that and to recognize somebody that is a peer to them within the departments, and appreciate everybody that's here tonight and the families that are involved as well. I also want to recognize Yixing Tao, who's sitting back there, who currently chairs our Employee Advisory Committee and does a phenomenal job with that. And Bhavika, I know is here, I just don't recognize her with the mask, but anyway, there she is, way over there, who puts together our Employee of the Year competition every year, has for the last several years, so appreciate that as well. And with that, Mayor, Councilmember Rowe, we'll get started. We are going to do a little bit different because of the pandemic. We will not be doing a group photo this year, so Mayor will be doing those individual photos as they come up. So from Community Services Department, the Employee of the Year is Sue Van Horn. Sue, can you come forward? For the presentation, I'll read a little bit of an excerpt from the nomination that came in. So Sue Van Horn is always a proponent of outreach activities. Sue proposed creating and implementing an outreach program through which library staff would go out into Chandler community, sharing information about programs and services, creating library cards, and doing demonstrations of new technologies. She coordinated more than 60 library events, establishing a relationship with GM Financial by providing a pop-up library and to Intel to hand out information about our digital resources. Sue also represented the library at the Mayor on the Move events, and the team provides new city staff with an introduction to the library during our new employee orientation. Sue, congratulations on the Employee of the Year from Community Services. All right, the Employee of the Year for General Government this year is Courtney Randolph from Communication and Public Affairs. Courtney, yeah, we'll get her out of the back. Her nomination reads partially, I am nominating Courtney for several reasons. Her creativity, passion, and innovation shines through every video she produces for the city. She went above and beyond in the production of the State of the City video. She spent days figuring out how to shrink the mayor, and on her own time built incredible props for the video. And you look great, Mayor, as itty bitty. Through the pandemic, the mayor and council requested videos on a daily basis. When most employees got to work from home, Courtney stayed in the office and worked overtime to help produce these videos to ensure our important messaging could reach our residents, while also producing public service announcements for other departments and other regularly scheduled city shows. Courtney always has a positive can-do attitude and never fails to take a video idea to the next level. We are so lucky to have such a talented and creative videographer on our team, and she deserves to be recognized for all her hard work. Courtney, congratulations on your Employee of the Year. Yeah, now back to work. From Cultural Development Department, we have Peter Bugg as the Employee of the Year. His nomination reads, Peter Bugg is the city's visual arts coordinator. His work as the staff liaison with the Chandler Arts Commission generated public arts projects such as the Public Safety Training Center shade structure. Other projects were coordinated in partnership with local businesses and city departments for the Commonwealth Canal mural, the Serrano's Centennial Wall mural, and utility boxes throughout Chandler. Enhancements to the public arts municipal process were also made during the last year. Peter managed multiple special projects for the Chandler Center of the Arts 30th anniversary, the employee picnic, and was instrumental in forwarding the design for multiple art projects that will have impact for years to come. Peter is active in the Chandler community as a yoga instructor and cares deeply about protecting the environment in our national parks. Above all else, Peter is a kind, compassionate person who is a great listener and regularly steps up to assist his fellow employees. Congratulations, Peter, on Employee of the Year from Cultural Development. All right, the Employee of the Year from Development Services Department is Terry Fitzhugh. Terry, you get to come back up. An excerpt from her nomination. Terry always has a friendly attitude with everyone she meets. She provides excellent customer service, looks for solutions to problems, and will stop to help out a coworker in need in the drop of a hat. Terry is committed to her job, and her knowledge and experience makes her a great go-to person for solutions and help. She goes the extra mile every time. I just want Terry to know she is very much appreciated and more than deserving for the 2020 Employee of the Year. Thank you for everything you do every day. Whenever I need landscape plans, she will go out of her way to research the document and even submit me a copy to make my job easier. Terry, congratulations on your Employee of the Year from Development Service and your future retirement. From Fire Department, Aaron Wilson. Firefighter paramedic Aaron Wilson has proudly served the city of Chandler for the past 10 years. In that time, he has developed a reputation as an outstanding paramedic who delivers the highest level of patient care in some of the most critical situations. Aaron has been recognized by both his peers and the Chandler community for his professionalism and dedication to customer service. In addition to his duties as a firefighter, Aaron serves as a medic on the Chandler Police Department's SWAT team and had been a leader in the development of the SWAT Medic program. Aaron serves as an excellent example for all employees to follow and would be an outstanding representative for the City of Chandler Employee of the Year. Congratulations, Aaron, on your Employee of the Year from the Fire Department. From Information Technology Department is Daniel St. Jean. Daniel exemplifies all of the city's core values. He is always willing to help and go the extra mile to make sure his customers are taken care of. He shows commitment, integrity, respect, and teamwork in everything he does. In doing so, he has earned the respect of his customers as well as his coworkers. Daniel joined the city as a contractor in the IT customer support team in January of 2018 and was hired as a full-time employee on February 11th of 2019. He provides support and resolves any issues with desktops, laptops, monitors, printers, phones, tablets, and scanners. He constantly excels in providing world-class customer service. He treats everyone with the utmost respect and exemplifies what a team player is. Daniel previously worked for the library, during which time he participated in the city's mentorship program, for which he elected the IT department. He made a wonderful first and lasting impression with his customers and leadership. On a personal note, his hobbies include basketball, his volunteer work at ICANN in the past for about a 2-year period. We're lucky to have Daniel as a member of Team Chandler. Congratulations, Daniel, on the Employee of the Year from IT. All right, from Law Department, Kelly Evans. Kelly Evans has been a paralegal in the legal department for the past 2 years. From her first day at work, Kelly has exemplified the core Team Chandler values. She shows her commitment by showing up to work on time with an eagerness to get the work done. Kelly is a team player who takes customer service seriously and treats everyone respectfully while ensuring the high quality of work coming out of the legal department. In 2018, the City of Chandler received notice that a settlement had been reached in a class action lawsuit filed by the District Court in New Jersey, arising from the sale and marketing of liquid aluminum sulfate by a number of companies, including General Chemical. I can't talk about this, right, Kelly? Okay, just checking. Civil lawsuit alleged that General Chemical had conspired to suppress and eliminate competition in the sale and marketing of liquid aluminum sulfate by agreeing to rig bids and allocate customers for and to fix, stabilize, and maintain the price of liquid aluminum sulfate for a period of years. Kelly spent hours collecting and organizing numerous copies of invoices generated by the city and purchasing this material from General Chemical. In May of 2019, the city attorney's office did submit a claim with the supporting documentation put together by Kelly. The settlement administrator did process that claim and issued a check to the city for approximately $94,000, representing 3.8% of the amount that the city purchased from General Chemical. The city was able to collect this money due to the tireless work performed by Kelly. For these reasons, she deserves to be named Employee of the Year. Congratulations, Kelly, for your Employee of the Year from Law Department. From Management Services is Janet Northrup. And Mayor, Council Member, she is not in attendance tonight, but I'd like to go ahead and read this so somebody can watch this later if they would like. I would like to nominate Janet Northrup because she exemplifies the qualities of what it takes to be Management Services Employee of the Year. Janet is one of the hardest working city employees I have had the privilege of working with. She takes such care and time to make sure that the budget tasks she is responsible for are accurate and professionally represented. She is a wealth of information and knowledge. She's always willing to share her knowledge when she can, provide valuable input, and it's commendable how she remembers such a detail on city policies and procedures and their origination, and I do know that's true. She is always looking to fine-tune processes and make them better for everyone, and always offers valuable suggestions. Even with the littlest task, she sees it to completion and always pitches in to make sure it is completed and done right. She is so organized and detailed that these qualities have been a great asset to the budget process. We have had so many challenges this year, and she has risen to the task and never missed a beat. I can't imagine what the budget division would do without her, and hope that won't be for a very long time. She is great to work with, and for all these reasons, I truly believe she should be this year's Management Services Employee of the Year. And congratulations to Janet for that award by your peers. All right, from Police Department, we have Danny Carter. from his nomination. I would like to nominate Danny Carter as the Employee of the Year for the Police Department. Danny was put in charge of rolling out the cell phones to the police department. This was a long task of planning with city IT on the logistics of this and being able to roll this out smoothly. Thanks to Danny's hard work and willing to work with other departments within the city, this was a smooth rollout that was time-consuming as Danny and his team had to put their hands on every phone to roll them out. Danny always had a smile and a jovial attitude, even when you knew he was tired from the long process of setting up 300-plus phones. Danny always took on the task of keeping the GIS police maps updated as well. Danny is always helpful, and you know when you go to him with an issue, he will go above and beyond to try and solve the problem. Through COVID-19, Danny's job functions have only increased. Danny and his small team were tasked with enabling and helping all the Criminal Investigation Bureau and the Criminal Investigation Section set up with remote access. Again, Danny's willingness to work with his city partners helped with a smooth rollout. Danny truly is a dedicated, hardworking employee, and Chandler is better because of him. Congratulations, Danny, on your Employee of the Year from the Police Department. All right, from Public Works and Utilities, Bhavika Baka. I am writing this nomination letter to express my sincere thanks to Bhavika for the support she provides to the pretreatment department. We hear an awful lot about teamwork these days, but Bhavika walks the talk. Bhavika constantly steps up and offers to help the pretreatment department, even though she has a full workload herself. There are weekly challenges that we sometimes can't handle on our own, and without being asked, Bhavika pitches in. From ordering supplies to staying late and assisting with reviewing sampling data, Bhavika is there without being asked. Bhavika is always going above and beyond her job duties. For these reasons, I'm nominating Bhavika for Employee of the Year. Congratulations, Bhavika, on Public Works and Utilities Employee of the Year. All right, and from Neighborhood Resources, Mayor and Council, we actually have a team that was nominated and won. That is Amina Bruno, Zaina Torres, Martiana Bird, and Heather Callis. If y'all can come forward. I would like to nominate the Chandler Public Housing Youth Program team for Employee of the Year. The Chandler Public Housing Youth Program serves the children and teens living in Chandler's public housing. During a normal year, the team facilitates an after-school program at each of the 4 family sites and provides quality intercession programming during the school breaks. As we all know, beginning in March of 2020 became anything but a normal year. On March 13th, in the middle of the spring intercession, the team said their goodbyes as the youth went home to shelter in place against the coronavirus. The team did not go home, however. Instead, they began creating new ways to serve the housing community and to stay in touch with the youth. Knowing that many of the families would be in need of receiving school lunches during the shutdown and that many would have difficulty getting to school to pick them up, the team decided to deliver the lunches directly to their doors. From March 25th to May 28th, the team delivered over 6,000 lunches in our public housing sites. The team created weekly activity packets of fun worksheets, coloring pages, games, crafts, and snacks, and delivered them directly to their doors. They exemplify teamwork, integrity, personal responsibility, and innovation. Together, Amina, Zaina, Martiana, and Heather well deserve the Neighborhood Resources Employee of the Year. Congratulations, team, on that recognition. Mayor and Council, that completes the Employees of the Year. Thank you.
So next on our agenda is a proclamation, Domestic Violence and Awareness Month. I'd like to call up Katie Kane, Chandler PD, and Samantha Hinchy, sorry if I've mispronounced your name, Chair of the Domestic Violence Commission. So I have a proclamation, then I'll ask if you two would like to make some comments as well. Whereas domestic violence affects individuals and communities nationwide, to include the Chandler community, and whereas domestic violence costs the United States $3.6 trillion annually, considering medical expenses, lost productivity, legal costs, property loss, and damage. And whereas in Arizona, every 5 minutes, a law enforcement officer responds to a domestic violence call. Every 44 minutes, one or more children witness domestic violence. And whereas research shows that having a supportive community reduces the incidence of domestic violence. Therefore, the City of Chandler strives to create a safe community for all to live free from abuse. And whereas the Chandler Family Advocacy Center joins together with law enforcement, prosecutors, and community domestic violence programs to help hold offenders accountable, educate our community, and provide resources to prevent domestic violence. And whereas the City of Chandler Domestic Violence Commission is committed to preventing domestic violence by endorsing prevention awareness campaigns and educating the community. Now therefore, I, Kevin Hartke, Mayor of the City of Chandler, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2020 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Katie.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for your ongoing support of the Domestic Violence Commission. We work together, as mentioned, with prosecutors and police and first responders to end domestic violence in our community, to make it safe in all of our homes. So thank you for your support in coming together as a community to end the cycle of violence.
Samantha, would you like to
Yeah. So I just want to say that everything that Katie said was exactly correct, and to honor the survivors and the advocates and law enforcement and the city council and the mayor and everything that we strive for in our community. We're holding an event that is usually in person, but will be virtual this year. And so that's coming up September 30th. So I don't know where to go to find that information. We can put it on the city website, I've been told. So look for it there. Please come. It's going to be great. We've been working really hard to try to make this smooth transition into virtual. And we hope to see you all there. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you both. Samantha, Katie, thank you. Council, next on our agenda is questions or comments related to the consent agenda, of which we will be voting on Thursday. At your seat at the dais is also a public comment by Mr. David Smith on item 3, And item 20, that's made available. I will not be reading that tonight. We do have some questions and comments that have been called in by council. So we'll start first with item number 2. Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. Get a presentation on this and just some background. If you could, please.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. If approved, the code amendment on your agenda tonight will implement a state law intended to address the challenges associated with short-term rental properties. Since 2016, local governments in Arizona have been prohibited from banning short-term rentals and regulating these properties any differently than they would other types of residential properties. Unfortunately, health and safety and nuisance laws that are usually used to maintain the quiet enjoyment of neighborhoods prove to be extremely difficult to enforce on short-term rental properties, since these laws are typically enforced against people and not properties. People violating nuisance ordinances at short-term rentals are often different weekend to weekend, especially at the so-called party houses. These properties would be rented out for the sole purpose of hosting large parties and become really disruptive to the neighbors. In 2019, the legislature passed a new law aimed directly at party houses and provided local government with a tool to ensure that short-term rental property owners are responsible for the activities that take place at their rented properties. The new law also authorized local government to collect contact information of the owners or agents of the short-term rentals and establish penalties for violations that occur at the property. A draft code amendment to implement the new state law was presented to you in a work session on June 8th and subsequently presented to the public for review. The public comment period was open through the month of July and was advertised frequently through various social media channels like Nextdoor and Facebook. The city received nearly 160 comments during this period. The majority of those comments were supportive of the ordinance, and some actually asking that we go further with the regulation. Others opposed the proposed code change. As you'll note, there's a number of comments that were summarized in the agenda packets. And then also here, there was a number of comments that asked us, like I mentioned before, to go further. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on where you stand, we are guided by state statute on how far we can do any kind of code changes. And so we'll look to future legislative sessions, as I know this issue continues to come up in future years, to continue to make adjustments and try to find the appropriate balance for short-term rentals in our neighborhoods. I'll revisit with some of these comments later on in the presentation as we look towards those comments that we're able to actually implement into this new code. The proposed code change requires the short-term rentals to obtain a TPT license and register their address, mailing address, and agent contact information with the city. It also specifically prohibits short-term rentals from non-residential use and requires notice to be placed inside the properties that outlines prohibited uses. Should the code inspector or law enforcement officer be called to visit the property, the code requires the owner or agent to be available for contact in person or over the phone within 60 minutes of the request. The code, as originally presented to the public, required a person to respond in person excuse me, to a request by law enforcement. Since state law also allows for alternative types of response, like telephone or email, the city agreed that it is reasonable to allow a responsible party to respond either in person or over the phone. This respects the officer's time to resolve the complaint while allowing the property owner flexibility. This more proactive involvement in the property should help address any nuisance issues that arise. In the event that an officer needs to cite the property, state law outlines a series of escalating penalties for each offense. For a first-time offense, $500, second, $1,000, and third, $1,500. These offenses must work their way through the verified violation process established by statute to ensure the property owner can adequately defend the action. A key component of the program's success is the ability for the city to require registration of the properties so our enforcement can more easily identify repeat offenders. More often than not, the property owner will work to address the issues so they can continue to quietly operate in the community. The verified violation process established by state law and recommended for inclusion in our code, provides us with a tool to address the bad actors. Should the council tentatively adopt the ordinance this week, it will be placed on an agenda in October for consideration of final adoption, and if passed, become effective 30 days later. And with that, Mayor, I'm available for questions.
Councilmember Stewart, any additional questions?
Thanks, Ryan. It's thorough, and I appreciate that. I'm interested in 22-3 as it relates to the TPT license. Short-term rentals are already paying a short-term, they're paying a 1.5% city tax already? Is that
Mayor and council member, my understanding of the way that the short-term rental tax works is that they pay the base rate of 1.5%, and there's also a 2.9% transient lodging tax that applies to any type of transient, so hotel, motel, those type of uses, for a total of 4.4%.
And you may not know this, but how do we collect that? Do we collect that from the Airbnbs and the Evolves of the world, or do we collect that from the homeowner?
Mayor and council, my understanding is state statute actually creates the mechanism for the Airbnbs to collect from the property owners, but they still must register with the city their taxable sales. And so, Don, if I'm misspeaking on that, please correct me.
You are correct, Ryan. Thank you.
So, Don, since you've been brought into this conversation, do you know how much revenue that we're generating from that, and what services are we providing for that revenue, for that tax revenue?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Stewart, we don't have an exact number on what we're collecting since we're unable to know how many truly exist in our city. But I think with this mechanism in place, we'll be able to better track as well from a revenue standpoint, as well as just tracking to be able to control and I guess help manage short-term rentals in our city.
Sure. Last question. On the first offense, it's up to a $500 fine. I don't think we're in the interest, at least I'm not interested in fining my neighbors and residents, even though they may have two houses in Chandler. Is there a stipulation where we can add a warning on that first violation instead of right immediately to the 500? I mean, that's probably something for council to discuss, but I'd like to find a little bit more about that.
Mayor and council, law enforcement has the opportunity to respond and assess the situation and then make the appropriate determination as they're responding on scene. I think that's the overall intent of this ordinance, is to create a balance that works for the neighborhoods and respects the neighbors, who are all participating in that, the activities of that neighborhood.
Okay, if that's okay, and then I'd like to introduce language that encourages a warning for the first violation, if that's possible, for me to feel comfortable approving this.
So I believe that would be an amendment. I'd feel comfortable with giving our police latitude, but if someone is belligerent and knowledgeable, but are just saying whatever, I would want to give them the ability to charge if there is a strong belligerence against this, but also give them the latitude to whatever. I mean, that's how I would feel comfortable. But city attorney, can you address Councilmember Stewart's possible change here?
If I may, Mayor, Councilmember Stewart, these offenses and the penalties are what's set forth in the state law. Generally, our staff works on trying to obtain compliance. So they give warnings usually first. The hard part is if you require warnings and you've got someone who's just continues to violate, it can sometimes tie the hands of it makes it more challenging to enforce it at times. But I think clearly if the mayor and council's objective is to warn and obtain compliance first that way, that can clearly be communicated to staff. I'm hesitant to recommend putting it into the ordinance because it creates an ability for legal arguments in the court system when we actually have to go to prosecution.
For example?
Then there's an argument of, is it really the first offense? Should they've gotten a warning? Did we write a warning? Or was it verbal? That kind of stuff. But I think that, if that's the council directive to provide the warning first, staff will take that and work with that. But the more you add in and change it from state law, the more subject to a challenge by a lawyer in court it can be.
Okay, we can take this, I'll take it offline with you, Mayor, and I'm gonna be a no on this until we can get it adjusted.
Mayor.
Anything additional, Councilmember Stewart? All right. Councilmember Orlando.
I have two in my neighborhood as well. I have one directly behind me and I have one a couple blocks behind, down on the street. The one behind me has been a really good owner. He lives in Austin, by the way. He's very responsive. We had an incident the other night. He took care of it without, I believe, calling the police. So that's good. They gave a warning to the house. We gave a warning to the owner. Remember, this goes to the owner, not so much the resident at the time. But the other one on the other street, and you could probably look this up, we don't have a very good owner. And we've had violations in that area. We've had police departments. So I think this is balanced enough. I think our police could need the latitude and be able to go to the door and say, look, we have a complaint. Here it is. Loud noise, whatever the case may be. It was a party. They had a pool party. That's fine. It wasn't us that called, by the way. It was somebody else. But that's beside. But he called me the next day, literally, on Sunday and said, I apologize. That won't happen again. And I said, I appreciate the comment. He was a good owner. I don't expect him, I expect him to get a warning, and he should take it for what it's worth. But the other owner, we're gonna have problems with that guy or a gal, whoever the case may be. So I'm comfortable the way this is right now. I'm comfortable giving our police officer latitude to make that decision on the fly and not be able to be punitive right away. So anyway, just want to share my thoughts on that, real world thoughts on that.
Councilmember Rowe.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, on the first offense, that's a petty offense with a fine attached. Is that correct?
Mayor, council member, it is a civil offense that is a fine associated.
Until the third offense.
Until the third offense within a certain.
And even in the
amount of
third offense, we don't, as a police force, municipal, we don't have to arrest anybody. They can still be fined. And they have an opportunity to go to court and discuss the fine.
Mayor, Councilmember Rowe, that's correct. And there's a piece of this that I think adds confusion to the whole thing, and that's Department of Revenue. The Arizona Department of Revenue's role in all of this. State statute specifically prescribes that they have fines that they assess as well if the city opts not to take the fine in-house. So the process works. There's a verified violation process that if I throw a wild party at a rental house, the property owner needs to respond to that. And then once I'm found guilty of throwing that party, then the city notifies the Department of Revenue that there was a violation that occurred at the property. And then the Department of Revenue then gets involved or not. They just need to be notified if they need to assess the fine or if we're going to do it in-house.
And that's from the first offense?
And that's from the property. That's from what the property owner is responsible for. And that's the first offense of $500 and the escalating fine up to $1,500.
Yeah.
But statute does authorize them to go to up to 1 month, half of whatever the month's rent is. It does authorize Department of Revenue to do that.
And our police officers do have the discretion to go out and contact an owner and make a warning and hope for some genuine cooperation and compliance.
Mayor, Councilmember Rowe, that is correct. They have the opportunity. The violation is subject to these. It doesn't necessarily say this will happen, but you are exposed to these liabilities if you don't comply.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Brings up a lot of new questions. How are we going to communicate this to the owners? So if they're not registered with the city yet, and they are going to possibly be fined for a belligerent guest, not a belligerent owner, that particular police officer is put in a position where he has to write the ticket. By statute or by ordinance, we have to issue a fine. So we've got this grace period of maybe it's 6 months to a year to 2 years where nobody really knows what the rules is, just evidenced by just having this discussion right now. Nobody really knows how this is going to work out. So we're implementing an ordinance that's going to fine owners of our community. I'd like to see maybe a little bit more discussion around this before we just immediately put something in. And I'll just leave it at that, Mayor. So thank you.
Okay. All right. Council, any additional discussion on this? Councilmember Wong.
So I just want to verify what Councilmember Stewart recommend. So do you want to table this item or?
I'd like to amend it, but I'd like to amend it to at least 1 year of warnings until people know what the rules are, until they understand what what breaking the rules means, especially if owners don't live in the place. We need, councils are, yes, I would like to amend it to at least add a year of warning period to owners before we start initially fining, because we don't have an option. If they get a ticket, they get a fine.
So, City Attorney, can you address the option question first for me, that Councilmember Stewart raised?
If I may, Mayor, Councilmember Stewart, we most certainly can do a delayed effective date in the ordinance. So a period of education that whatever period council deems appropriate, where it'd be more education, and then actually not issue citations for that period of time. That is easily done in the ordinance.
Second.
So we're not voting tonight, thank you. So that wasn't my question, though. My question was.
He called for an amendment, so that was.
We're not voting.
I understand that, but he called for an amendment, so I seconded it. So.
Again, that's not what we're doing tonight, though, at a study session. Back to my other question. Councilmember Stewart raised, do the police have he states he doesn't believe this gives the police an option to give a warning that they're mandated. Would you address that for me, please?
I'll defer to the city manager on that.
Mayor, I would like the chief to come forward. We did have an internal committee that was put together to look at this ordinance and how it be rolled out. First of all, I'd like for Ryan to possibly address, is this not already part of the state law and how long has that been in effect? And then Chief, could you explain how you all respond to these types of short-term rentals currently and how you would respond if this ordinance is passed by the council?
Mayor, Council, City Manager, the law passed in 2019 and became effective around August of 2019, and various cities around the state have already begun implementing it. We chose to wait until now because there was additional action that the legislature may have took, and we didn't want to do something premature. However, the law is already the law on the books, and it does create these opportunities for us to educate. There is a 30-day cure period once the council if the council opts to pass the resolution. There's an effort that our tax and license team, as well as everyone else, has already thought about on how to incorporate a notification process for these short-term rentals. But ultimately, that is the goal, is to make sure the community is aware. I will just note that when we went out for public comment period, we did receive a record amount of comments on this. My understanding is that it received a lot of attention because of the popularity of this issue, and overwhelmingly the community was supportive of this change.
Just one quick question.
Is it for Ryan or for whom?
Yeah, for Ryan.
Okay, please, Councilmember Wong.
So just want to confirm. So you are talking about this is a time-sensitive issue. Now the council is required to amend it or pass it in a timely manner.
Mayor, Councilmember Wong, it's not necessarily. It has been about a year since the state legislature passed it. There have been inquiries from the governor's office on how many of these cities have actually implemented the statute that they asked for. And because our process seems to be a little more deliberative than the state, we don't get everything done within 100 days. We have taken the time to make sure we got it right. And so while we can take more time to get it right, we have taken almost a year to work on this ordinance with stakeholder input.
Okay, thank you very much.
Chief.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I believe there's really two issues that are being discussed right now. This ordinance is an administrative ordinance that would allow our code enforcement to identify owners after the fact and maybe do some education on the front end. But if we are called, it's no different than any other time that we were called. If there's a criminal violation, we're either going to take action, whether it's a form of a warning or an arrest or maybe a citation. So if there's a criminal activity occurring, we will address that. But this ordinance will really give some teeth to code to do some administrative work on the front end and on the back end. If we're called there, we're taking action immediately for whatever the violation is, criminal violation.
Okay. Mayor. Councilmember Orlando.
So Chief, just an example. I'm in my vehicle and I made a legal left turn, whatever the case may be. The officer at the time does have an opportunity to give a warning ticket. Now I'm using, in general terms, I use that as an example, obviously gross violations. So even though the law says I could be ticketed for something, there may be an extenuating circumstance, whatever the case may be, the officer does have the right, and I respect their right to say, hey, here's a warning, don't do it again, seatbelt, whatever the case may be, hand on the phone, something like that. Is that true? I mean, officer does have that latitude?
Well, like all hypotheticals, it's going to depend, but oftentimes an officer, depending on the scenario, could certainly utilize discretion and issue a warning.
Right, and that's the same thing here. An officer shows up and the individuals turn down the music or something, gives them a warning, says, hey guys, tone it down, but if he has to come back again, now we're making a mockery of the legal system. And the individuals are. And in that time frame, perhaps there should be a citation.
Again, it's going to depend. That scenario plays out every day across the city.
Yeah. So this has been, let me just clarify, this has been a law for a year now. So how many cities have adopted this already? How many cities already got the communication out to the industry? I know the property manager that runs this place knew about the state law. The one that I called, that called me the other day, she knew about the state law. She knew about the issues involved. So I don't know what we mean by giving more time. Look, our residents have been very, very patient with these short-term rentals. I've gotten a few phone calls. Like I said, I live it. I can't walk in this one neighborhood sometimes because they badger me about, this neighbor, this bad person. Our residents are asking us through the state legislator, through the governor's office, who have been very I'm glad he signed this bill. He's been very gracious to the short-term rentals. Our residents are asking us to take action because their HOAs can't take even action against these areas.
So that's actually.
So I don't mind, I don't mind if we want to delay another month or two for education, but a year, I just think that's not answering our residents' call for this activity. So that's my personal favorite.
Councilmember Wong.
So if Councilmember Stewart or Councilmember Rowe would like to do something on this item, maybe you can put it as an action item and then present your amendment at that time. So you may be able to bring some change. That's why I know. Yeah. If you like. Yeah.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. All right, Ryan, thanks so much for the presentation. I think what we have here is a lot of unanswered questions about the intent of this ordinance, right? So we've got stories about, is this like a speeding ticket? Can I give a warning? Is that language in our, there's a lot to unpack from what Councilmember Orlando said. I agree with him that we have neighbors that are very frustrated with some of the short-term rentals. But is in our ordinance for speeding, is there terminology in the ordinance that says, and you may not know, but maybe the chief would know, that says that police can give warnings? Would that be in this, or is that just discretionary across any laws and ordinance that we have in the city.
Mayor, if I may jump in on that, Councilmember Stewart, any of our laws, there's discretion.
Okay.
It's inherent.
Okay, thank you. And then I think the deeper question here is again, what are we trying to solve, right? We're trying to give code enforcement and our police department, moreover, code enforcement, the ability to make sure that we don't have any bad actors. And so the part of this ordinance, in addition, and part of your presentation, is it gives a owner, is it 60 minutes to show up on site or at least be available by phone call if there is a violation?
Mayor, council member, that's correct.
And is that state or ordinance?
It's the ordinance.
It's
Mayor,
the
council
ordinance.
member, the state asks that the responsible party be available with a number of different means, including show up in person.
So this is new information. It's more than what happened a year ago. This, and the law that was passed, this would be additional information that the homeowners would need to know about. Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilmember Stewart, correct.
that-
Another piece of this, though, and part of state statute, is to post the rules of the short-term rental within the property. And so there should be awareness of that. And these type of rules and the contact information that's required is not new.
Absolutely. And so in trying to work between what the neighbors want that live in these neighborhoods with short-term rentals, in addition to being respectful of property ownership in the United States, we do have to sort of balance that, right? And so I'm asking for, and I'll continue to ask for, a grace period of education. If that's a year, if that's 2 years, whatever that may be, before we initially start implementing fines for this new ordinance, just like we would do with any change of speed limit, with any change in turn signal or turning behavior or anything like that. So thank you very much.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Stewart, I might just recommend along Councilmember Wong's lines, if you would like to have a real conversation around this, maybe you would like to request it to be moved to action, and then council has the opportunity to amend or continue the item, however you want to do it on Thursday.
Thank you for the suggestion.
All right. So this action has been moved to, this consent item has been moved to action. And then the appropriate amendments or seconds that Councilmember Rowe or others would like to do are then appropriate. I would like to thank, with the record number of folks who did apply, who did comment to this to give us some robust conversation. I want to thank our community for also sharing their thoughts and their wishes with us as well. So thank you, Council. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Chief. Our next item is item number 3, Vice Mayor Lopez.
Yes, I want to just get a brief presentation, again, the background. We get a lot of calls, again, we get, I wouldn't say a lot of confusion, but again, the purpose behind why we're having to expand Gilbert Road, which a lot of us know, but we want to make sure it's public, and then also, again, the impact that this is going to have on those neighborhoods.
Through the mayor, Vice Mayor Lopez. The project is primarily to put in traffic signals starting up at Ocotillo at those 2 shopping centers on the southwest and southeast corner onto Gilbert Road for safety, traffic flow, and so forth. This was a project that's in design, and then the Chandler Unified School District came in with their plans for the high school. So we've kind of amended that project. What we're asking for is the authority to acquire the property rights we need for those traffic signals, and also to meet the critical time limits that the school is requesting everything to go with. There are 8 properties altogether. 3 are north of the canal and in the city, and those are 3 that my group is acquiring. 5 of them are south of the canal, and by our IGA with the school district, they have agreed to assist with doing those acquisitions.
John.
And that process is ongoing at this time.
I would like John Knutson to come forward and I think more particularly address your question, Vice Mayor. in terms of the need for this project.
Yeah, and that addresses part of it. You put in, again, a statement there that, again, this is an expansion, right? So originally, we did know that due to the traffic patterns, and again, I'm in that neighborhood. I know a lot of people are, see a lot of traffic on Gilbert with the two new shopping centers, getting a lot of traffic through there. So and the addition of the need for additional traffic lights was new. I didn't know we already had some slotted for that, but I know with the new high school coming in, as you mentioned, that's causing an expansion of this, right?
Yes.
So John, if you want to maybe add to that?
Yes, through the mayor, Councilmember Lopez. The project, as it was a year ago in the CIP, was only to add traffic signal at the Fry's Shopping Center further north towards Ocotillo. When Chandler Public Schools announced the high school to be built at the location on Gilbert Road, it was found to be necessary that the roadway to be expanded from its 4 lanes, 2 lanes each direction, to 3 lanes each direction, from about the RWCD Canal through to the Bash's Shopping Center there, further towards Chandler Heights. And so that's really to handle the amount of traffic that we're expecting. There was a traffic study that was completed by the school district that showed the necessity. So there will be the traffic signal that we already had planned for the Fry's area. There will be another traffic signal further south at the main entrance to the high school, which will be near the stadium area, and then another traffic signal at Brooks Farm Road. So there'll be an addition of 3 traffic signals along that route. And all of those, well, 2 of those are based on the need from the high school's addition.
Along with widening the Gilbert Road.
That's correct. So we have a IGA, intergovernmental agreement, with the school district for them to pay for their impact along their frontages. So they'll be taking care of the widening costs and the traffic signal installation costs as caused by theirs. We, the city, are taking care of the north and south tapers, which will bring it in to the 3 lanes that will match up to our current 3-lane configurations, both north and south.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that our public was aware that, again, even though this high school's coming in, there's a lot of concern in the additional traffic, because then around these high schools, it brings in a lot more traffic, and that we have already done studies. There is accommodations for that, for, again, the expanded roadway and for additional traffic signals to improve safety. So just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Orlando.
Mayor, so you mentioned earlier that we put Mr. Smith's comment in our record for tonight, but he was concerned about transparency in this whole process. And I was a little concerned about that, obviously, but what have we done to ensure that the proper due diligence was done, notifications?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, I did speak to the resident this afternoon, and we spoke about a lot of things. The neighborhood obviously expressed concerns about the high school. 3 issues were of his concern. The first would be during the construction of the widening. At the same time that the city will be doing the widening along Gilbert Road, the school district will have a contractor that potentially could be working along Brooks Farm, doing a widening there as well. So I committed to the resident that we would coordinate all efforts between the Chandler School District's contractor and our own to allow for access both on the Four Peaks Drive, which exits to the north out of their subdivision, as well as Mead, which exits west onto Gilbert Road. So I've also committed to give them phone numbers of our construction managers and of our public relations folks. So we'll keep them completely involved through the construction process. Beyond construction, he expressed concern about traffic control signage at Four Peaks and Brooks, and I committed that we would look at that with our traffic engineering group to make sure that whatever is there would be appropriate for the amount of traffic. And of course, we don't know how that is really going to develop and the traffic patterns that will develop once the school is open. So I committed that we would be watching that very carefully and working with the neighborhood to make sure that they have the proper traffic control there. Then he also, the third item that he expressed concern on was the traffic circulation patterns that will be developed for the buses and the student drop-off. And I know our staff, as well as the high school staff, construction group, has worked diligently on trying to determine the best routes. And I know from other issues we've had within the city and school traffic patterns that our traffic engineering group will be working diligently when that school opens up to make sure that the traffic is optimized as absolutely as good as it can be. Given the fact that it's a mid-block high school, it is different than the other high schools. So there will be some challenges, but we'll work diligently through the opening days of that school to make sure that we can get it right, and then continue on as days pass and years pass to keep it optimized.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you. So the issue here also is the fact that we just finally got the drawings, at least from of the widening of the road, and obviously some of the property we have to purchase or what do you call get additional properties. So a lot of this actually just happened recently, and I say recently, short period of time. We knew we were widening the road. We knew there was going to be widening, but we didn't know exactly what area, what piece of property I had to buy until just recently.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, this project, as sometimes happens, was one that was a surprise to the city. We were given the project, and so we are executing a kind of a fast-track construction method on this. And oftentimes in these construction methods, the design barely leads construction. And that's kind of where we're at today. Tonight, we have an item here for the construction contract for this very project. And the design is just now finishing, so you're right when you say that. So we are also committed to give and sit with the HOA members as necessary when we have a complete set of drawings, to sit with them and show them, the different issues and the different features that will be there on Gilbert Road. And so we've also committed to do that as well. So when those drawings are completed within the next days, I've committed to supply those to the HOA as well. And there have been conversations, I believe last week, with another council member of the HOA. So we've had communications with them off and on here for a week or two. So.
And I think the issue really now is that this is an exception rather than the rule. The rule is we'd have a due diligence process. It'd be lengthy. Just a couple of them we had just recently on Alma School Road. We had neighborhood meetings, outreach, we had a communication plan. This one was a little bit, like you said, fast track. So yeah, in some respect, we're trying to do the best we could, knowing that this is a short-term project.
That's correct.
Fast track project. Okay.
That's correct. This
Fair
one
enough.
was not handled like our normal ones, because our normal ones, we have a much longer process, a much more calculated process that includes all the public awareness.
Thank you for reaching out to Mr. Smith. I certainly appreciate that. Thank you.
Any additional comments on item number 3, Council? All right, next up thank you, staff. Next up, item number 4, Councilmember Orlando.
Thanks, Mayor. This is another innovation or a thought process here, and I wanted to, those of us that have alarm systems, every year we have to pay $10. I get this thing in the mail, and usually it's a month or two late, and I apologize, Chief. But I guess with this new group, it's not going to be late anymore, right?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I said we all get a $10. Those of us that have alarm system get this $10
Right.
piece of paper every year. And usually mine's a month or two late. I apologize. Forgive me, but I guess with this new group, I'm not to get away with being late again, right?
I've received the same letter.
You did? Okay, good. All right, I don't feel too bad. But seriously, Chief, this group is working in other cities right now. I guess I want to just get we're changing the process a little bit, and how we communicate out with the residents, how they know that this group is collecting the money now versus, going to City of Chandler.
Well, yes, Councilmember Orlando and Council, this is a significant change in the way that we've been doing business in the past. The city presently has about 14,000 alarm permit holders. That's residential and commercial. And the police department manages that program, which includes the permit registration and then the false alarms. The process is conducted manually by members of our special support section. And presently, a resident would go online and download a form, an application form, fill that form out, and then mail it to the police department. And then even if that person wanted to update their alarm permit, they would have to download that form and again, mail it to the department. But once that form is received, it's then reviewed by our folks, and it's looked at manually, then a scanner, and it's entered into our database. PMAM provides a cloud-based online program for new registration applications for both residential and commercial alarm users. And it offers real-time options for viewing invoices and client history, but it allows citizens to apply for permits online, and they can pay online. And utilizing this process, they can be alarm compliant within minutes, opposed to days, actually weeks. So it's a huge change in the way we've been doing business. This is something that we currently don't have. It's a service we don't provide. And to be honest with you, citizens and businesses have been asking for this for years. Per our city ordinance, each home business is charged $10 for an alarm permit, and it's $10 a year to renew that. And on average, we collect about 70% of those alarm fees each year. PMAM, their goal is to collect about 95% of those fees, and then also increase the amount of alarm holders. We have 14,000, and their goal over the next 5 to 8 years is to scale that to about 75,000, which is about right for a city of our size. But equally important is that PMAM will provide education to security companies and to residents, which is a significant impact on the police department, because we respond to about 7,000 alarm calls a year, and the overwhelming majority, high 90 percentile, are false. So if we can reduce the number of false alarms through education, it really frees up those limited police assets we have on the street to do police work and go to true emergencies. So it's really for those reasons that I support having PMAM manage our alarm program.
So this frees up your administrative staff as well to get this, scan it, make sure it checks.
Right, it's not entirely freed up. They still will be the liaison. We are the ones that would entertain the appeals if someone has an appeal about an alarm, a false alarm. So obviously we're still connected, but it does free up many staff hours that can be dedicated elsewhere.
Okay, and they have a good record of history of working with the residents, those that are delinquent. I don't expect them to be knocking on my door and saying, give me my $10, right? I mean, not seriously.
No,
right?
they're not going to be.
They have a pretty good
knocking on
record,
your
I
door,
understand,
right.
of dealing with residents and making sure that they're updated and things like that, right?
Right.
Good.
And
All right.
everything is real time. They can look at their alarm record. They look at everything's available to the alarm holder and to our officers as well online.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Chief.
Additional comments? Thank you, Chief. Item number 9, Vice Mayor Lopez.
Yes, why don't you just get a brief presentation on what we get at AMWA, why we pay them, and some of the activities that they do for us throughout the year.
Through the mayor. Thank you, Vice Mayor. The Arizona Municipal Water Users Association was established in 1969. It's a nonprofit association of 10 municipalities here in the Phoenix metro area that advocate for responsible water stewardship, that support economic prosperity, and safeguards Arizona's water supplies for future generations. AMWA is governed by a board of directors comprising mayors and council members representing the 10 member cities. And our vice mayor serves as the city's representative on that board. AMWA provides a forum for its members to share information and evaluate water issues of importance to them. The dues for this organization are based on both the number of the members and the population of each. So the way that they actually calculate the dues is 50% of the dues is split up by 10, the 10 members, equally. The other 50% of the dues is a population-based calculation. So City of Phoenix, they would pay 50%, they would pay one share of that first 50, but because their population is quite a bit larger, that they pay quite a bit larger piece of that second 50%. So I think that is kind of how that rounds out. The dues this year did reduce slightly because of savings that the organization had last year because of the COVID issues. They did not do much traveling like the rest of us. As well, they had a vacancy in their organization. So that savings was then passed back to the member organizations. And so that speaks to why typically I think the dues are around $108,000. This year it's less than that.
Thank you. So yeah, I just want to also inform the council again, as serving on that board, and they do many things and represent all of the AMWA cities at the state legislature, the education this last month with all of the primary winners to educate them on water. They also attend, Warren, who's the executive director there, attends many, many water meetings within CAP, within SRP. He deals a lot with the governor's office and the Arizona and ADWR. I remember the names now. I know abbreviations. I've been in the world too long now. But it does provide a very, very good asset and value. And as mentioned previously, they run a very tight ship. They run very efficient and effective, get a lot done for the money that we provide them. So I just want to make sure the council is aware and the mayor that we do get a good value out of this fee. So and maintaining this membership.
Mayor.
So, Councilmember Orlando.
And I just want to thank the Vice Mayor for his work on that committee. I know you've been on that for a while. It's an important committee, and it's good to be well represented. Thank you very much for that. And being our expert on water, we appreciate that.
I don't know how I'd say expert, but yeah, I'm still wet behind the ears. Yeah.
Ditto. All right. Thank you, John. Next is item 13. I've got comments, then we'll go to Vice Mayor and then Councilmember Orlando. But I think Councilmember Orlando and I were both on the initial discussions about incubators in Chandler. And we are committed to supporting entrepreneurs who add to our economic dynamism of our community, enhancing our reputation to be the community of innovation. And in an effort to further support our technology-oriented entrepreneurs, we're continuing to advance the goals of Chandler Innovation Incubator via our partnership with Moonshot, used to be NASET. And through this partnership, we're able to provide valuable resources and support for the entrepreneurial community, and I'm excited to see this continue. So with that, next, Vice Mayor.
Yes, thank you for this. I just wanted to make sure again, we did show and reflect, give a presentation on again the benefits NASET has given over this last year. You know, we have it in the report, but it'd be good to hear that from Micah.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation to present to you this evening, Mayor and Council. So we are we're wrapping up our final year of our current contract with NASET at Moonshot for the management of the Chandler Innovations Incubator. This past year, we set out with some performance measures in mind. Every year we have contract goals that we shoot for, and they vary. And a lot of these goals are built around what the intent of innovations is. And its primary intent is to support technology incubation in Chandler. This incubator is not geared to your general service businesses. We are laser focused on advancing the community of innovation goals that Mayor of Council set out. So a number of the things this year are applicants. We are at about 55 applicants in the program, 34 active client members. One of the big things for us though is really getting out there and also using this program to leverage Chandler from a technology attraction standpoint. We talk about how we go about positioning ourselves for those type of technology jobs. So we use Chandler Innovations to help sell Chandler when we're going, innovations when we're selling to companies, particularly smaller companies looking for assistance growing. Maybe they're leaving a coastal climate or somewhere else in the country. We talk about how we have these services here that distinguish us from competitor things. And so one of the things that we put into the contract is a number of press releases. And this past year, our total potential audience and reach of that. Multiple press releases viewed by multiple individuals have the ability to generate nearly 1 billion impressions for the city of Chandler. So that's a huge one for us. So again, as we're out there telling the Chandler story, Innovations Incubator is a component of that. Again, going back to the technology component, those are higher wage jobs that council has set out as goals for us. So of the jobs created through the client firms this year, we're looking at about an average salary of $79,000. So this is pretty good for startup companies as they begin to grow. And the other things we really look at are revenues generated and equity capital raised. And our companies in the program have generated north of $2 million of equity and grant investment. So there's a lot of good momentum. We're continuing to press the Moonshot staff. Ms. White has joined us from Moonshot tonight. So we're really excited with the direction. We're continuing to make tweaks and changes. Obviously, this past year was unique for a number of our client companies, and they failed, which is okay. We've always known companies are going to fail, but let's fail quick. Let's reiterate and get on to the next thing. And I'm happy to answer any specific questions you may have, Vice Mayor.
No, these are great numbers. Again, I want to exhibit again the great investment and productivity that NACET has provided for a relatively small amount. The payback has been great. So I wanted to thank NACET for all the work they do. And thank you, Micah.
Councilmember Orlando.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and when you get a chance, can you get us the latest on their metrics and how they're meeting them? I appreciate that. And you might have sent it out, but I'd like another copy of it, a current copy. But I guess my question is a little bit broadening here. The city's doing certain things, training, recruiting. The chamber does certain things. Incubation's doing, Moonshot's doing certain things, and Gangplank's doing certain things. There might be other stuff out there. I guess my question to you is, and you don't have to answer it tonight, but what's the big picture here? How are they working together if they are? Should they be working together? What are the strengths that one has, the weaknesses, and are we putting all this together in a clear strategy? Because again, once we know what the clear strategy of all these organizations are, and there may be no strategy there, I don't know. But my point is, if we need resources, then we could be able to apply those resources once I know where they're going. So it's a broader question to you. And again, you don't have to do it tonight, but I really want to get a feel for what are we doing with all these other entities and organizations to be able to get a big picture of what we're trying to do here and not duplicating effort if that's the case.
Through the mayor, council member. Yeah, so each organization has specific lanes they generally play in, and the role innovation plays specific to what the city is contracting with is that technology development, really staying in that vein, whether it's around the client assistance, the marketing, that leverages up to the larger city brand. And so that's the specific area. There is overlap between a lot of different organizations that are in this space, AZ Tech Council, the Greater Phoenix Chamber, Chandler Chamber of Commerce, GPAC East Valley. And so we partner. Chamber's been a partner in this. They give innovations clients a free membership, which is great because then that helps as these companies grow. They have roots in the community. They become engaged in the chamber. They have more of those personal relationships, which then are leveraged into Chandler Innovations clients buying services from other businesses within the community. So we can get into more of those specifics, but generally there's a lot of communication and interaction on particular issues.
All right. Like I said, I just want to see a bigger picture here, I guess is what I'm asking for, okay? Thank you, man. Thank you, Mayor.
Any additional comments? Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. Well, as you know, this program is pretty near and dear to my heart as it relates to entrepreneurship. And Ms. White, you've done a tremendous job of marketing, but also bringing new ideas and a fresh approach to some of these things that we've been doing. The Innovations program has been around for a while, and I know it's incubated a number of very successful businesses, some of which I think we saw in the Mayor's State of the Union, State of the City last time. So it's working.
Are you speaking about the shrinking machine?
The shrinking machine's still in the validation phase. So no, so I guess my deeper question here is that what could we do if we had more funding to do outreach and to bring more people in? I mean, we're in a time right now when you're in a recession. This is when most startups happen. This is when most people say, okay, you know what, I lost my job. I got a little bit of savings, I want to do this. What could we do if we had innovation grants? What if we did things that were specifically related to technology grants? What if we were able to use CARES Act funding to double the amount of investment that we're doing with this? And talk about what Councilmember Orlando is saying, is creating this umbrella sort of organization, and maybe NACIT runs it, that has a deeper meaning and a deeper, because I think we're limping into this. So I'd love to see something from Ms. White and from maybe your department on what something like that could look like, that we could all take a look at and say, okay, we've got a little bit extra CARES Act money, maybe we put it towards this and really blow this thing out of the water. Is that something we can do?
Through the mayor, council member, absolutely. Actually, one of the contracted responsibilities of Moonshot this current year is to work on, and this really goes to Councilmember Orlando's question as well, some strategic planning around goals and initiatives driving out of this. From a high level perspective, really, continuing to drive availability of angel investing. We're still a young community in that marketplace, so we had some efforts in there from a regional perspective a number of years ago. I know you're involved in that. That's something I still think we can take to the next level, and we'll be taking a look at this contract year.
Thank you. And to the Gangplank point, I'll leave this one last fact. 2 companies that came out of Gangplank that started over there when I started my campaign 4 years ago for city council have just recently been funded through Series A, millions and millions of dollars. And they started with a little idea right across the street at Gangplank. So it's working. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Micah.
Thank you, Councilmember.
All right, our next item is item number 17, a presentation from Waste Management Contract, and brought forth by Councilmember Orlando.
Mayor,
Councilmember.
I'm good with this.
You're good.
My questions were answered. I don't want to, yeah.
All right.
You're good. You got off the hook, buddy.
We're good. We will keep her short.
Sorry, but I think
that was the best presentation I've seen all night. Item number 20, similarly, I had some comments, but I thought we've covered this and don't need to go any further on that. I did want to make some comments on item number 21, which is, again, the activation for Veterans Oasis Park. This has been something near and dear to us, and this contract will provide for the full design and construction documents to complete the Veterans Memorial. The final construction will symbolize the American flag and columns of different heights to represent soldiers leaving and coming home from war. The design will also incorporate the F-86 currently on display at the corner of Chandler Boulevard and Delaware Street. So this has been an important project to council, and I want to thank staff for working on this, and you've brought us some pictures and additional comments.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You gave my presentation almost word for word. So I don't know what else I can add. I'm here to answer any questions that you would have.
Additional comments?
Yeah, Mayor.
Councilmember Orlando.
Yeah, this has been dear to my heart, as you know, for a long time, many of us up here, so I really appreciate it coming forward. The only thing I would ask you to do, Andy, is the original veterans that put this design together, there's still many of them around. I would hope we could reach out to them and be able to ask them if there's any changes or things that they like to see in the final design, because there has been discussion between concrete or something else. So I think we owe them one last look at this before we, put it in quote concrete. Okay.
We certainly can. We have a list of 13 groups that we worked with on the initial design. So certainly, if that's the direction, we can meet with them and just confirm that this is good to go.
Yeah, and I'm sure there will be, but there's a lot of enthusiasm for this. And so I would love to have them have one last look at it. And they may just say, that's great, let's press on. When can we get it done by? That's probably going to be their question, but that's all right. We're going to handle that one. Thanks. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Terry, yes, sir.
Yeah, just real, I know that this is about design, finance, but this has been something that's been tossed around for a number of years now. Do you know if they're still thinking of artificial turf or actual grass in that area?
Through the mayor to Councilmember Rowe, that is something that we'll work through the design process. Obviously, our main concern is how do we maintain this so that it looks sharp year-round? And so
Right.
that will be a discussion point of what we'll do there. But yeah, maintenance is going to be the big key on that one.
Yeah. And will people be able to walk around on it and enjoy
Certainly.
it? So that's part of the question. So thank you.
Good question.
Some challenges.
And Mayor, just to follow up on Councilmember Rowe, at the original time, the reason I wanted to get to the veterans group is there was the American Legion and, of course, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, both at that time, and I'm sure they'll honor their commitment, were to be able to provide manpower, to be able to keep this looking good, and also to provide tours for those that want to do that. So, and that's all because they're veterans and they want to do this, they want to give back. So again, reach out to those groups and I'll help. I myself could help you or some of the council members up here, but we definitely want that commitment to get that commitment again that they're going to take on this project, keep it looking sharp, keeping it looking the way it should be done for those that served in our military.
We'll certainly follow up on that.
Thank you.
All right. Last two, we'll just go to 29 and 30.
I'm good, Mayor.
Councilmember Orlando.
I'm
You're
good.
good?
Yeah.
Well, that was the second best presentation I've seen all night. Council, that concludes our study session tonight. We do have an exec session. Why don't we take a 5-minute break and meet in the other chambers? And that concludes our study session tonight.